I don't know. Today I'd like to talk about a reaction, or more of a sort of response, I guess, to Second Thought. Now, I don't actually really agree with Second Thought necessarily. I have reacted in the past, and have agreed in the past, but there are multitude of different points that we disagree on. So there's that. To be clear, but so I'm trying to say is I'm not somebody who's defending Second Thought. I've made videos in the past who critiquing him, but this video isn't really a good critique because it misses a few things. So let's dive into that just to show there's not bias against him. Sometimes people make bad arguments. Maybe I made bad arguments. Who knows? Anyway, let's dive into this video.
Hey internets, so recently Second Thought came out with one of the silliest takes on the mainstream media I have seen in quite a while. Here's the video in case anyone thinks
Now, keep in mind, I don't know what takes you've seen, but there are many stupid takes in the media.
I'm being dishonest about it or misrepresenting him. You can watch it yourself.
There is a bias here. There is a reason why I'm questioned. Like when I say, I generally don't say if I'm critiquing somebody, watch it in the description because you are already prefacing the bias against them. That you're going to be. It's the confirmation bias. Someone's going into the video is if they suspect that you're lying, they're going to the video wanting to prove that you're lying, and if they're going to the video to prove that you're right, they're going to the video with intention to prove themselves right that you are right. So that's not really great there. It's better to watch that video first and then watch the other video. It's a thing that is well known that you be careful with this sort of thing where like you don't want to bias yourself. So you try and get the thing that you're gonna be critiquing. You try and get that first, so you get your own impression. Anyway, that's just a side thing, not the best there. Anyway, yeah, moving on.
In that case. Also, I will be doing this response video as a gamer rant with some heckin' Fumo racing because
Sorry, one thing. Can I just make a point? Does this make me look like this background? Does this background make me look like I'm a right winger who might be a little bit bordering on the fascist? Because in general, this kind of background does like it does. Um, you know. So do you know what I mean? But I will say. I think the whole gaming thing definitely makes you look like a bit of a right winger. So maybe not the best choice. I've made bad choices with my background before that I think it has made people think that I'm like some sort of right winger. I'm not. Um, like a far right person. Anyway.
A, this doesn't really require much visual aid to understand, and B, I need to make
it is mostly audio.
sure I am giving this particular take from Second Thought the extreme level of seriousness that it deserves.
I mean, I think the problem really is that maybe I'm a little bit over serious at times when it comes to these like videos, but like I think there's certainly an aspect where people don't take things seriously because like, oh, it's stupid. It's like, okay, but Second Thought is one of the biggest left-wing channels on YouTube, so I'm not sure if that's the best idea to be like, by the way, guys, I'm not taking this seriously at all, like, in other way, in case you're wondering, like, there's no seriousness here, I'm just having a laugh. It's like, okay, but then what are you actually, doing then? Like, what are you actually doing to argue? Are you arguing from a point of view, because you just said you're not arguing from a point of view, sorry, I'm just making a point to maybe take things a little bit more seriously than, than nothingness. It doesn't matter. But not really, you know what I mean? Just there's a way of phrasing it. Having a having fun, having a fun reaction, and it not being like a really sad one where you're like going, "You are a fascist," that sort of thing. You're gonna kill people. You're not getting dark, but also, you also understand that it's not.
Anyways, I'll start.
You'll be making fun of the person.
Start out with a quick paraphrase of what he said. Basically, he names a bunch of right-leaning media such as Fox News, PragerU, or the Daily Caller, and their
Daily Wire.
donors or other
It's I presume. Okay, the Daily Wire and PragerU are funded by. I'm not. They're two different brothers, I believe. But they're funded by fracking and oil. So they're fossil fuel corporation funded. There's a lot of suspect around whether they actually do make a profit. They seem to spend a lot of money. So like they make a lot of money, but they also seem to spend a lot of money. So it may be possible that they don't actually make a profit, which would make sense seeing as they've got billionaire funding. Unlike Fox News, which, while it is owned by billionaires, it is more so that it was funded with the intention to set up like an ordinary business. It definitely did move more to the right. If you want to see that, well, pre-Roger Ailes. I said pre, as in pre, not with an F.
Financial sources of financial backing, such as the Koch brothers, as well as seething over a few influencers like Jordan Peterson and Ben.
Yeah, influencers on the Daily Wire. My fucking god, they're on the Daily Wire and PragerU. They're just anchor hosts. This is like someone saying influencers is like Tucker Carlson. Well, like Tucker Carlson basically is an influencer now, but it would like saying Tucker Carlson's an influencer when he was on Fox News. Like, not really. Like, yes, they're an influencer, but they're an influencer on the program you're critiquing. So if you're critiquing the Daily Wire, yeah, you're going to be critiquing the people on it. Would be a bit weird if you didn't.
and Shapiro. He then uses this data to paint a picture that the mainstream media empire exists to push right-leaning propaganda by starting from the argument
Sorry, what?
that the mainstream media empire exists to push right-leaning propaganda by
I mean,
starting from the argument that no amount of similar money is being used to fund pro-socialist media.
now, keep in mind, before you begin your argument, you do need to understand that you're going to need to, you know, you're going to need to actually say socialist media then. You can't just have this argument and go, well, I mean, you say that, but look, the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post, and they're like, sort of, but they're not like actually socialist. They're just kind of socially left wing somewhat. But also, yeah, it's the Washington Post. It's a bit socially left wing, but yeah, also, sort of thing. It's like, oh yeah, we're fine with gay people, but we will still kill them with climate change. We will still do that, but as an equal, they along with all the poor people will die. See, equality. As long as you ignore the rich people will be prioritized above the poor. But anyway.
Problem here, of course, is that his reasoning is completely ridiculous. I, as an Austro-libertarian Hoppe enjoyer, could easily make the exact same argument for the right in reverse by cherry-picking out MSNBC.
But you wouldn't actually be cherry-picking out. The likes of right-wing outlets get billions. Which socialist outlets would be getting billions?
Or the New York Times or the Washington Post and some
Sorry. List that off.
Verse by cherry-picking out MSNBC or the New York Times or the Washington Post and some left-leaning.
Okay. MSNBC, not actually a left-wing outlet. It's
by cherry-picking out MSNBC or the
centrist.
The New York Times.
The New York Times is bordering on right-wing. So.
Or the Washington Post. And
yeah, once again, Washington Post is more of a socially, left-wing, but not economically.
Some left-leaning billionaires.
It's not. No, it's not left-leaning. The fucking Washington Post is. That's not. They're not left-leaning though. The billionaires, I mean, like it's like left-leaning billionaires, which is a statement that makes very little sense. But anyway, like what you mean to say is officially, they've said they're left-leaning, whatever the case may be, but they're not though. They're billionaires. Billionaires can't really be left-leaning unless their billions are only in like a technical way. Like they are technically billionaires in the sense that they gave away their billions, but they weren't stupid enough to just give it away. They gave away their billions, but officially speaking, technically speaking, they still own the things. Let's say I own, a billion in a massive supermarket chain that gives food out for a cost, and people go, well, it's worth a billion because, if they were to charge the number of money that they could charge, it will be worth a billion. It's a massive supermarket chain. And that would be an example of it. They're technically speaking worth a billion, but not really, but no, because they don't actually make loads of money from that. There's not profit being made there, but profit could be made there is a key thing. There's those kind of billionaires, but the likes of Jeff Bezos, they're not those kind of billionaires. Those are billionaires who are very much so, squeeze the work for all they can get. So, no, not actually left-leaning. The Washington Post is not a left-leaning outlet. It's socially left-leaning, but it's economically definitely right-leaning. It's definitely economically right.
Financial backing
also, you would have to say, because it's not, technically not talking about right-leaning necessarily, it's talking about, like, actually right. So you'd have to, if you were doing the opposite, you'd have to bring up actual socialist media, which gets billionaire funding, which is, only ever really to have the kind of thing. It is really second thought as an example where you have this sort of it gets funny, but it's only so that you can have this sort of very specific type of left-leaning thing where it's like, oh, it's an extreme which is never going to happen, but also this extreme takes money from the likes of Amazon, so fuck them.
Such as George Soros or Mike Bloomberg.
Okay, you didn't have to say you were a fascist, but anyway.
And whatnot. And then I could then, of course, make the exact same video that Second Thought made, using the exact same biased reason.
But that's not a good example, because Fox News is more right-leaning than the New York Times is left-leaning, because New York Times isn't left-leaning, it's right-leaning. But let's go But even though socialism is an economical point, yes, there's social aspects to it, but in essence, it is an economic point. That's the key factor. So not really. Like none of the outlets you named were actually really economically left wing.
reasoning that he used, but while painting the
But those
exact
are bad examples.
opposite picture and pointing out that the amount of funding that the Mises Institute gets pales
Right.
in comparison to what these guys are shoveling. And then,
Right. That's
of course, further cherry pick by saying this guy donated to that organization, or this organization funded this guy's campaign, and yada yada yada, and they sent $200K here, and this guy sent $1 million.
But do they get elected though? You can't really give that an example because it's like reflected in the government. You know, it's like, oh, what are the policies? These are the policies. Okay, this is the reality. You can't just go, well, the money goes here, and the policies do not get passed. Kind of seems like that might be intentional. Maybe they gave the money so they could appear to do the work, but actually not. You know. Like the whole thing of like Democrats being like, oh, we'll put through a universal healthcare plan when we're not in power and we know it will fail. So really, can you trust that we actually wanted this to pass? No, you cannot, but it'll look like we can. So that means the next time when we're campaigning for election, we can say, look, we tried to pass through a universal healthcare plan, but it was the Republicans who stopped us. We definitely wouldn't have stopped this ourselves if it was the Republicans who did it. No. No, definitely not. You know, it happens all the time. It's a constant thing in America, and that's a problem. I also think you should go beyond America, you know, but
here, and
will be a better example, you know.
so on and so forth. But it wouldn't mean anything, because as it turns out, cherry picking is a fallacy and not honest reasoning. Of course, I'm not going to make that video. Why? Because
yeah, but the thing is, right, the Daily Wire, PragerU, Fox News are, and maybe ignore Fox News to be honest, are examples of the most right wing, but also the most, you know, successful outlets. So you would have to pick successful outlets, even if you are cherry picking. And when you were cherry picking, you didn't pick actual outlets. You picked right wing and soft left outlets, which are not actual alternatives. They're not the opposite side. They're just more left than the Daily Wire. That's great. The New York Times is far more left than the Daily Wire. It's still right wing, slash centrist, you know.
again, that's completely ridiculous reasoning. If you want to honestly answer the question, where does mainstream media influence generally lean politically and what direction is it going towards, you wouldn't try to calculate this from your own political position, unless you yourself are a centrist. No, you would obviously need to look at the top watched mainstream news sources and then average the data out based on the center. And then you could start to build a model that paints a more accurate picture. And of course, you would also want to properly account for the fact that the center itself has moved, unlike that one insanely stupid study that Vox tried to push.
The center is a bit of a complicated thing because American center is different to the world almost. Like the world, like even in cases where there are countries that are outright, you know, they've got far right organizations and have done for years, and they've got little less bit right, basically pretty much no left wing. They do have left wing stuff, but they're not successful. That's my point. America. That's the key point. You know, if you have this, America is that kind of country, and it means that their center is a very right wing. Their center is a fairly right wing thing, which means that everyone else who goes, the New York Times is left wing. Really? I read this article here. That's not a left wing article. It's like, yes, it is, because look, this is our centrist article. It's like, what the fuck? What the no, that's centrist to you. Seriously. Like centrist to in my country would be like would be far different to an American, you know? So that's the key thing. Like a centrist in my country would be a left wing in America, you know? Like that's just how that would work. So when you bring up this thing, it's not really a great example because Americans have a very odd way of doing a centrist talking point. Most Americans seem to sort of pick the center as whatever like the Democrats are, but also the Democrats are a little lying piece of shite. So you know, not the best example. You know, so really the centrist point is actually fixed. It's just that what people call the center in America is terrible, and Americans have a very poor concept. Most countries, their concept is almost unified, despite the fact that they have a very complex and different scenario. You can go to one country in Europe and Asia, and it'll be very, 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 very right wing, but their center point will be the same as another country that's very, very, very left wing, or another country that's in the center. Their center points will be the same in the viewpoint of the population. It's just that who is winning is different. So in most countries, and now it will differ to be clear, and there's all the different complex policies that will differ slightly, but they won't differ as much as America does, and that's why this is sort of a key problem. This is actually not a great example because Americans don't understand the center and disagree with most countries understanding what the center is. So not the great example, I would say there. But anyway.
So in order to properly review what Second Thought was saying, I'm going to do just that. Let's honestly, sincerely this time, answer the question of where the mainstream media generally lies on the political spectrum and what direction their influence seems to be swimming in. Now, before I even get into the data behind this, I'm just going to be totally frank here though. Anyone born in the 1980s or earlier who has not been living under a rock kinda already knows that it has been swimming left. I'll just be real for a moment. You can compare what we remember from those.
I mean, that depends. If you have, for example, if you have in a country, you have two parties, and both parties shift. One party shifts to the right, and the other party shifts somewhat to the left. And they should have even possibly passed each other by. Maybe one party actually becomes so left that it actually passes the other party, and the other party shifts so right that it passes by the initial position of that party. So it's true in the United States that it has shifted both left and right, but that's not really a good estimation because, the United States is a highly racist country in its history, highly sexist country in its history, just an awful country, let's be honest, and it still is today. So, given that, you have to ask, okay, but has it moved left though, or has it just moved, in the direction of left? Like it's moved left, but it isn't on the left though. Anyway, but it's also moved right though. If you look at the Republican Party, it's definitely moved right in very recent history as well.
Those times to today, and to even try to imply otherwise is nothing less than just pure gaslighting. But
Not really true though, because if you look at the Republican Party, it is objectively true the Republican Party has moved to the right. That's like if you look at any political analysis. Now, if you look at it overall, sure, but the overall is not what you should look at. Overall is not in any way what you should look at. You should look at the actual policy proposals. When abortion gets removed from being a right, that's not a nation being more left. That's a nation being more right. Ask yourself that. What are the practical policy implications? Having less inequality, having, more emphasis on that, and of course there's also other things as well. Just correcting history there's various things that are problems with this statement.
let's look at the data anyways, because some of it actually is pretty interesting.
Where's it
And
from?
while Second Thoughts video may be silly, the topic itself is a serious, important question. And just anecdotally saying, oh, I'm old enough and wise enough to remember otherwise, is really just my lived experience, and we all know that's not exactly a good argument. Or it's generally just not a complete argument, would be another way to put it. Let's start with some Pew Research data from the last decade. First off, it shows that there's more news media sources that are trusted by those who are on the left.
Sorry. So, more news media sources trusted by those on the left. So, the only issue with this, right, is that if I'm on a news outlet, right, and I'm able to tell when they're giving a certain viewpoint, like I'm able to tell when they're biased. But the thing is, their bias doesn't creep into what they report. It doesn't mean that they will squash facts. It doesn't mean that they will ignore things. It doesn't mean that they will, make up quotes or be very odd with their phrasing. It doesn't mean that they will suppress images or suppress news stories. It doesn't mean that if it does report on all the news outlets, it's just that it gives a little bit of a little bit of a push. Then in that case, I'm able to trust it in a way, but only in the sense that I know what's going on. Now I may not know what's going on, to be clear. It's just that I think I know what's going on. The way like. But the point is, in that scenario, what's going on there is that you are able to look and think, okay, I trust that outlet won't lie to me, and all of its negative failings I can sort of understand. There are various outlets like this. I've seen various outlets, that are outlets, and that's a thing which can occur, which is just like, well, that's clear nonsense. I know, I'm aware of all that. Unlike the likes of Fox News, which you cannot know, like they'll just sort of suppress stories and they'll sort of lie to you, and that's a problem.
There are double the mainstream sources that,
I mean, more news media sources trusted by those on the left
are consistently liberal and have a trust.
The only problem with this is like, okay, first of all, how many news sources? What makes it valid for the news? Also, liberal is not, socialist, and being 51% is not great. That's not like a good score. It's like, oh, well, half of us trust you. Well, that's certainly, yeah, it's yeah. The fact that like the New York Times is an example of a left-wing outlet that's only trusted by 62%. So, okay, so 48% of people. No, not 48. Would it be? It'd be 38. 38% of people. 38% of people don't trust the New York Times.
score of over
on the
50% than those
liberal
that are
side.
consistently conservative. People who lean towards the right in general do not trust the mainstream media as much, which just further gives you a hint of which direction the media leans.
No, it gives you direction of which business leans. If I'm Fox News, I don't want you going over to CNN. I don't want you going over to those other news outlets because I work on an advertising model and potentially a subscription-based model, and I want you to buy my goods. I want you to buy my services. You pay money to me then. So in that case, you won't have these stations that get hurt by being trusted by many. If you're a conservative and you trust all these stations, your money gets shared between all these stations. If you only trust one station, two stations, three stations, that's intentional. They want that to occur because if that occurs, then you give all the money to them. Very simple business practice. Very understandable. Very, very easy to do. Well, not that easy, but it's easy enough. It makes sense, to do as a business practice. So, not really a good example. Because, you can still, the New York Times could be exactly the same as Fox News. Fox News doesn't want you to turn over the New York Times. It's a business thing. It's not necessarily an ideological thing.
Based on the audience that they attract, because obviously they need to pander to some kind of audience. The research plotted on a left-to-right
Yeah, but liberals are not socialists, so...
spectrum graph also shows that we are seeing a clear center-left bias based on where most of these media sources and their audiences lie. When, of course, we are comparing...
Their audiences are not necessarily reflective in what they're saying. If Fox News was a sneaky outlet and wanted to appear liberal but slightly inject fascist rhetoric into people's minds, they could do that. But they're not that. They're objectively right-wing and very much easily so. So there are many, outlets that do inject sort of like a soft right-wing sort of thing into stuff, and that's a practice which makes sense. Fox News is not one of those outlets, though. So,
comparing the most watched conservative-leaning sources and the most watched left-leaning sources, as opposed to, just cherry-picking one of them, because again, that's completely ridiculous.
Yes, but Fox News does get more viewers, though.
Dishonest reasoning. And the fact that we have a center-left bias in the media really shouldn't surprise, well, anybody. Again, if you've been paying attention at all over the last 50 years, this is pretty easy to spot. And this conclusion of there existing a center-left bias in the media has also been reached by various other sources. For instance, when we go by Ad Fontes media chart, we can also see the biggest cluster seems to be having a center-left leaning bias. Or how about we check out media bias? Biggest cluster
Yeah. Okay. CNN has moved. NBC is owned by multinational. ABC is owned by multinational. The areas they're not here are... Yeah. Also, I noticed that you've... the Wall Street Journal is over there.
Seems to be having a center-left leaning bias. Or how about we check out media bias fact check? Again, the largest amount of results appear in the left-center bias. And again, does this really surprise anybody? As I've said before, we, for the most part, live in a liberal, mixed market society, which means that the establishment is going to be controlled.
I mean, last time I checked, the majority of the government is right-wing, so,
by that ideology, and of course, the media is going to largely reflect that ideology, as most influence.
Right, ignore the fact that the Republican Party is the majority of the House, and they've just elected recently a, right-wing theologian to the House speakership. Ignore that, guys. America is a liberal country.
Will generally reflect where the power is coming from, as it always has done.
Which, by the way, if that's the case, is not great for American democracy, is it? Like, if you're someone who goes, oh, America's clearly liberal, okay, then why does it not reflect in its government? Because its government certainly isn't liberal. Its government is centre-right. Or, if you want to be honest, about the actual government that's in power, ignoring the Democratic Party completely, it's very much right-wing.
In pretty much the history of human civilization. But of course, this alone is not a complete story. As I said before, we need to also further account for where the center has moved. And yes, I know, again, if you have not been living under a rock, then you probably already know the answer.
Americans, this is not a good thing, because Americans are terrible at understanding what the center even means.
This question. But seriously, let's take a look at the data anyway. And this is where we start getting into the data that reflects what we would call the cathedral, or just a shorthand way of saying journalism plus academia, as mentioned by Curtis Yarvin. I did an entire video on that and what it really means and just a basic analysis of it. You can watch it if you want, but the basic idea is that there's a decentralized collusion that tends to kind of come down into the area where most of the power and influence concentrates. This results in a decentralized narrative collusion where people who wish to seek prestige and rank within the inner circles of academia and mainstream journalism end up aligning themselves with the most popular.
This is actually not the best thing, because if you're in whatever media outlet it is, there are very different media outlets you can go to. So, and there are also interesting anomalies where, you'll have a media outlet that will have a certain overt statement and overt ideology, but actually that will not be the ideology within the business itself. So, obviously, if you're an outlet that's supposedly left wing and you're a very left wing person, oh, that's really good. But actually, the outlet itself isn't actually that left wing when you look at the business side of things. And then you begin to notice actually underneath they have pulled a few stories here and there and changed the facts around just a little bit, just to keep things in check, not to rile people up too much, make sure they keep in line. Basically, this is a very effective process. You make sure that anyone who's on the left doesn't become violent, doesn't start having a protest that actually gets out of hand, doesn't do anything that will actually hurt things. Maybe they have a nice protest, but the protest is nice and civil, and there we go, very clean, very boom, boom, boom. There they go, they represent it, boom. We don't need to have them having a feeling that they're being oppressed. Don't worry, your little heart. You're fine. You're never going to get any power, but you're fine. And that's the thing that occurs there. So that's not really a great example because there are different media outlets, and those media outlets are different oftentimes when they're inside. So not really the current thing. It's also you'd want to be careful supporting the current thing. Generally, what happens is your public ideology gets fixed around what outlet you're in supports. Being just the current thing tends to get you just thrown out because you just become this useful tool of we can use this person, but we're not going to promote them anywhere further because they're useful. The likes of Tucker Carlson is someone who is very willing to move any way he likes, and after a while that becomes fucking dangerous. Because this fella's no, we want someone who's fixed, even if they're lying, by the way, even if they do not believe the ideology that they're saying they believe. Being consistent is what gets you to the ranks. Lying as well, yes, but being consistent in that lie. If you are actually a very left-wing person and you're in your personal beliefs, but you are outwardly very right-wing, you stay that way. Because moving too swiftly makes you look erratic, and someone's going, I don't trust this person. No. So it's not really the current thing. It's more so the thing that is most popular in that area. But that area stays the same. Its popularity of that area may differ. If it's, for example, a right-wing fundamentalist Christian university, well, maybe people don't really like that anymore. And that university has seen a massive drop in the number of people applying and their funding and all that. But it has stayed the same. It should do at least. If it's honest. And that's the thing. The popularity of the thing itself may change, but the actual popularity of the ideology within that thing should not really change that much. Because in that case, you might want to be a little bit concerned.
Ideological components within these institutions in order to, again, seek prestige and rank, but also to mask their lack of ability to form their own unique opinions or critically examine how these institutions...
But see, the problem with that is saying that someone hasn't formed their own unique opinion. If I am someone who is very left-wing, but outwardly very right-wing, if this person I'm reacting to right now could be secretly a massive socialist, could really support socialism, but if their intention is to rise to the ranks of Fox News, they're not going to say that, are they? They're going to have a consistent ideology that is not the ideology they believe in. But they will work all day and all night to help that through. Of course, they couldn't really be a socialist in that respect, because then it's like, well, you're helping yourself over others. Okay,
from the outside.
But you know what I mean.
As far as where academia lies,
doesn't really work with socialism, because socialism is a bit like saying you're an ethical person, and then it's like, oh, but you hide it, you're going to kill little children. No, though, I'm not sure if that works. What do you achieve if you do that? Well, you achieve wealth for yourself. Okay, so you can not abuse the wealth. I don't know. That doesn't really work. Doesn't really work with socialism, but you get what I'm saying, though.
I could go into pretty extreme detail of that, but there's a very easy way to see that, and that's a study where it shows that only 2% of sociology professors will openly identify as conservative or right.
I presume this is in America. Conservative or right-wing in America is very much so bordering on far-right in other people's opinions. And there is, of course, one reason for this, which is if you're a university professor and you go and you stand in front of a crowd of students, you go, I am willing to see you all die. If tomorrow you all died, I would be okay with that. Until my university did have to remove me because I would have no students. But, I would be perfectly okay with that. So I would. See, this is the issue. University professors are in the unfortunate position that they're selling themselves to students. If you're a professor, it's not a good idea to say fuck off to your customers. If you're a shop and billionaires and millionaires are paying the fees to pay for your products, and economically speaking, the price is so high that if you brought it down to the point where poor people could afford it, you still wouldn't make enough money to make that worthwhile, then yeah, that makes sense. But in a university scenario, that's going to be very complicated because with education, at a certain point, it's just not worth it. Once you reach a few over 50 grand, 70 grand, 100 grand, over that retrospect, that point, it's like many university courses become fucking useless because sure, you get more money in your lifetime off of this degree, but that money you spent could have been saving you a lot of money. If you're spending 300 grand on university, sure, you could do that, or you could buy a house and slice your entire spend on accommodation in half. So it's just not really a great example. That's probably why they wouldn't admit to that. Another reason is they're a little bit educated about it. They are most people who are conservative are either conservative because it helps them or they're stupid. Um, and for a university professor, sure, they might be very well paid, but they might not be too well paid. They might be well paid in the sense of like, well, there's not much work to do, but they get well paid. But to be clear, I'm not saying there isn't much work to do. I'm just saying if there was not, for some university people, there isn't much work because they work only a very few hours. Others work many more hours. But the key thing is that in this scenario, you'd have to go, well, that's going to be a position of does it help them? They're educated about different ideologies, and does conservatism help them? If it doesn't, then why would they be a conservative?
Right-leaning. In fact, interestingly enough, you are more likely to find an open Marxist-Leninist sociology professor than you are to find one that is even just right-leaning. And
right-leaning in an American sense, though, who knows what that even means?
You certainly
I mean, we do know what that means. It means fairly right-wing, but
are not going to be finding any Austro-libertarians there. These kind of statistics...
Yeah, in the sociology department, maybe, but what about the economics department? Because I would say most economic professors are... Just if there are any economic professors here, maybe just skip it a little bit. Yeah, are a bit stupid, somebody, when it comes to, like, sociology. As someone who studied economics, my God, I remember reacting to Last Week Tonight, and it's like, well, that's supply and demand. And you went, John, okay, supply and demand. Sure. But the thing is, if we're talking about needs, if we raise the price of a product, and demand falls, but we still make enough money because, of the demand that's left is paying the extra price, then those people are dead, John. That's what happened to those people. They died. So it's all well and good to have this market ideology of, we make more money this way. Sure, except we also kill people this way. That's how you kill people, by having a need. And you go, well, no, supply and demand curve states we make more money by charging more money. No, but I'll die if I don't get that. Well, you should spend more money. I don't have the money. Okay, we'll work more. I am working more. You increase the price so that even though I'm working pretty much all my fucking life, making this completely pointless, this entire existence, because I'm just working to exist to do more work. What's the fucking point of that? But I need to work even more. I can't. So the end point is I just die, and that's a problem of a lot of economist lecturers who just don't have a concept of like, yes, but a little bit of sociology is a bit important if you're not arguing for the genocide of the poor, because supply and demand curves should be very, 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 very much cast out when it comes to needs, because otherwise, if you don't, you're admitting you just are willing to kill people because they're poor. Just a clear point. So sociology, sure, but in universities, you need to bring up the point that the universities are not just sociology departments; they're also other departments. And other departments are certainly very much right wing.
This would be basically impossible if there was not at least some kind of left-leaning bias in these institutions. Now, as far as the cathedral goes, currently it has been very much...
But as I said, that's not a great example because sociology would make sense. I'm just saying you are literally, if you're not someone who is a wealthy person, you are quite stupid if you're a conservative. No offense meant. And when I say a conservative, I do mean American conservative, which is fairly right wing. That sort of position makes very little sense unless you're a very wealthy person. Now, I'm not saying it makes no sense to anybody, as I made clear. If you're a very wealthy person, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a good deal of sense. And yes, that is all well and good, but at the end of the day, you have to think, well, what is a sociology professor going to do? They're at least a bit educated. I would be concerned, to be honest, if there was a sociology professor that wasn't like a millionaire, that was a conservative. Because why the fuck are you conservative when you're supposed to be aware of different ideologies? You're supposed to be educated on this. You're not a millionaire. You don't benefit from conservatism.
Leftwards, also known.
Also, the fact that you already are, a sociology professor, you already have your job. If you were a young person who wanted to be a sociology professor, maybe then you could make the argument because there's competition, so you could be conservative in the sense of minorities and go, those people shouldn't be getting jobs now from our country, and all the way conservative and all that stuff. If you had that ideology, that would make a bit of sense. But if you already have the job, why would you be conservative? You already have achieved what you want to achieve.
As Cthulhu swims left. Now, one thing I do disagree with Curtis Yarvin on is that I don't believe that Cthulhu always has to swim left. He can swim...
Yes, take Nazi Germany.
Swim right later in the future, perhaps. But in the last 50 years or so, it has been, for the most part, swimming left. And this is, pretty much just an uncontested fact. And this is why Second Thought's implications are just so utterly ridiculous. The mainstream media has been overwhelmingly doubling down on various lefty progressive talking points.
Right. Except, and here's the thing, there is a little aspect, which is called knowing something will fail, as discussed in this video by me. If a Democrat says, we're going to introduce a bill that will allow for equal rights for all the people who are discriminated against. And the Republicans go, we're going to block it. And the Democrats go, oh no, guys, look, it failed. The Republicans, would you look at them now? And then they go, oh, okay, well, we'll vote for you in the next election. The Democrats win both House and Senate and presidency. And then they go, now, Democrats, you're going to pass it, aren't you? Yeah, we just need to do this stuff first. We'll pass it. Sure. Definitely. We'll put a bill through. No, the Republicans didn't really like that bill, so we made a few changes to it. It's like, why did you make the changes? Did you need to make the changes? Well, a few of ours didn't really want to support it. So it's like, you voted it unanimously the last time when you knew it would fail. It's a bit odd, Democrats. It's a bit odd, you know. How come this isn't passing? You know, it's looking Christ, you know. It's like, oh, we have control of the House. Oh, it passes. Oh, it fails instead. Oh, we have control of the House. We don't have control of the House. Oh, it didn't pass. Oh, we could, yeah. The point I'm making is that all of that also occurs in the media, or at least it can occur in the media, where the media will go, oh, look at this idea, isn't this a good idea? We know it's not going to pass, so, we can promote this idea all day long. Somebody who's a right-wing outlet and is intended for a right-wing audience cannot say that because they will lose their audience. From a business perspective, that's not a good idea. But an outlet that is really right-wing in their actual ideology, but left wing in their output and left wing in their viewership, is going to generally say left wing stuff because they don't want their viewers to say, this is feeling a bit right wing, I'm going to leave. They want to make sure the left wing people are there, but they also want to make sure the left wing people are pacified. So, but yeah, so not really great, yeah. And that's the thing. So they put some left wing stuff, but they don't put all left wing stuff
over the last few decades. And so for him to play the victim here when the media is clearly swimming more towards his side anyways, makes absolutely no freaking sense whatsoever. This is just a classic case of victimhood and projection. And if you want to further know where the center has moved, again, you can just look at what a centrist on average believes in the 1990s, and
once again, American centrist is not a great example.
Compare them to today. Or even better, or even funnier, I should say, is compare your average Democrat from the 1990s and compare them to today, and you will find that their positions very closely mirror what conservatives are saying today. Again, just tying into the running joke that a lot of boomer conservatism
but Democrats are conservatives though, so
is just Democrats minus 20, 30, or 40 years or so. At least as far as United States Republicans versus Democrats goes.
Yeah, but that's a terrible example.
Which, by the way,
famously, people view the Democrats and Republicans as basically almost a one-party state, and the Republicans went, "Oh, really? No, guys, let's be more right-wing."
If you want to see something really funny that emphasizes this, just look at Bill Clinton's State of the Union address in 1995, where he goes into illegal immigration.
Don't actual left-wing people hate Bill Clinton?
The Democratic Party's positions on illegal immigration and border walls.
I'm pretty sure most very left-wing people do not like Bill Clinton. But anyway,
back then almost completely mirror what Trump Republicans are now pushing today.
Trump Republicans today are pushing for an invasion of Mexico. So,
particularly silly example that shows just how completely
they're also pushing for pulling aid out of Ukraine, which is objectively stupid, even from a selfish point of view. Like, even if you don't care about Ukrainian lives, just from your own point of view, fucking stupid,
insane it is to try and imply that these parties and political affiliations have not moved left in general. But also, what about financial influence? Second Thought did mention lobbying and following the money, so let's take a moment to go ahead and do
You're not going to do the anti-Semitism, right?
Just that. But instead of cherry-picking organizations and their funding, which happens to share a particular ideology that I personally don't agree with, the more honest move here would of course be to use a more neutral source. For instance, the list of top lobbying contributors from Open Secrets, which shows that Democrats received about $5.6 million from the top federal lobbying contributors, and the Republicans received about $3.4 million. Once again showing
Yes. I think this might be a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Democrats are, though.
A clear center-left bias, at least from the point of view of American politics. Oh, and let's not even get started on...
Right, but you just said, though, remember when you said that the Democrats mirror what the Republicans are saying today? Do you remember that? Might that be an indication that maybe using what each party gets funded is not really a great example? And maybe what we should do is we should look at the likes of, your Bernie Sanders types. How much do they get versus, your Donald Trump types.
Where Hollywood and theater factor into this equation of influence. They have been basically doubling down on leftist prog intersectional identity politics for the last decade, and the evidence for this is again overwhelming to the point where I probably don't even need...
Yeah. Last time I checked, it's very interesting. It's like, oh yeah, they're doubling down on identity politics. Yeah, it does turn out though that Disney, for example, is and definitely was extremely racist, like extremely so. So, yeah, they've moved. That's a good thing, in my opinion. I mean, personally, I would say separate the societal left wing from the economic left wing, because they're two different things. As I said, you could have the Washington Post go for something which is more left-wing social, in a social way, but they are very much so an economical right-wing / centrist organization. So keep that in mind. And that's the key thing there. Hollywood isn't really a good example because Hollywood has a pretty dark fucking history. So yeah, it's moved to the left, sure. It was fairly right-wing though, so you know.
Decide it because it is self-evident to anyone paying attention. But
yeah, it's self-evident. True. Yes, I would admit that is definitely true. But
just in case you do need some empirical evidence on
yeah.
this, here's a little picture, and I'll cite the source in the bottom.
What is that? What is that graph? So, more liberal, centrist, conservative. What is that? Donors? Does that say?
In the description.
Donors. I'm not sure what the graph is quite saying. It's a little bit.
Check it out if you really, really want to, and if you just gotta look at that data. But really, again, it's pretty obvious to anyone who has not been living under a rock.
Right.
But also on
it's not a particularly good graph. I don't mean in its. I just mean in the way it's designed.
That subject of wokery and DEI, some may
please never say wokery.
Recall my last video on ESG scores in BlackRock. Yeah, so you want to complain about a few $1 billion of Koch brothers money? How about the trillions of dollars of assets under management of the firms like...
You are aware BlackRock is not like they're an investment firm in the sense that they buy shares. They don't necessarily their main investments are shareholding, not actually really true investments, BlackRock is generally speaking more of a safe investments idea. They will buy up businesses like Apple, all these kind of businesses. They buy up all these businesses. They'll buy up aviation industries, all these things. They're worth trillions, but they're not worth trillions. They're not setting up trillions worth of businesses. They're buying trillions worth of shares. Bit different.
BlackRock and Vanguard, which they have been pushing to be based on DEI standards that have been baked into ESG. And how about...
Yeah, but the thing is, if BlackRock buys 10% of Disney tomorrow, or at least 10% more of Disney, they're not buying 10% more of Disney to make Disney, anything. Like they're not making Disney. They're not investing to set up Disney. They're investing to make money off of Disney.
The fact that they're lobbying for those various ESG standards to be pushed into law.
They want money.
Perhaps you might want to mention that. And this is what really makes sense.
Yeah, but BlackRock is a financial institution. The Koch brothers have their financial side in their oil fracking businesses, all the brother businesses, the two fucking brothers, they're invested in fossil fuels. Those are their money makers. Their money makers are not the likes of the Daily Wire. The money makers are not the likes of PragerU. Those are not the money makers. Those businesses, I would say, do not make the money. I don't even think they even own them necessarily. They may own them. I'm not quite sure what their ownership thing is with them, but I'm not quite sure if they do own them outright. But the point is, they're not really investment vehicles. They're not designed to make money necessarily. They probably are. They probably do want to make money eventually, but their intention is very much to push policy, not to make money. While BlackRock is more so to just to make money. Possibly make money off of pushing policy as well, but, it's more direct,
Second Thought's implications and conclusions from his cherry-picking so incredibly deceptive. If you understand the logical conclusions of DEI, you know that they ultimately progress on the political spectrum towards an authoritarian left position, aka closer to Second Thought's position. So what exactly is he complaining about then? That right-leaning media just Second Thought's position. So what exactly is he complaining?
Yeah, have to say, don't particularly like Keem anymore.
About then, that right-leaning media exists? Does he just not like the fact that it exists? Is that what's going on here? Is it just a covert anti-free speech rant? And that's what...
that's not anti-free speech, is it? It's like, I'm against free speech, the way back in my day, you weren't allowed funnel billions into everyone's pockets. Nowadays, I walk down the street, and the man who's talking on his phone about people is getting paid billions by oil barons. Every random fella just talking is getting paid billions by oil barons. Wait, no, sorry, correction. No, not every random fella. Specific random fellas. Also not really random, they're more so, very specific random fellas. Very specific fellas.
The saddest things about BreadTube in general, they are trying so very hard to LARP as anti-establishment, but they can't do it because said establishment has been occupying a lot of their talking points.
The only issue, right, is that objectively, all the outlets you named are not socialist. They may be left-wing, but they're not socialist. They're just not. So,
Learn more with each.
If an outlet is the most left-wing you can be in a social sense, but not economically, then they're not socialist. Disney might make a movie. Well, by the way, Disney is very much so. They are not willing to go to the fullest extent when it comes to social things. They've shot down films for having like they've cut scenes as well completely, not just in China, for like all different things. Not your perfect example if you're a right winger for a media company. But the point is to know that if Disney was the most social thing, it would still be massively economically right wing. Disney is a massively economically right wing organization, you know.
each passing decade.
So it's not a good example because it's not great. You objectively are wrong because they're not socialist. Sure, there are left wing outlets. Sure, left wing outlets are in general more successful as a combined group, but so are Americans.
And lefty prog identity politics, of course, in the media.
So
Media has essentially been the establishment's go-to psyop for manipulating the minds of the normies since the early 2010s. So instead of citing more neutral data like I just did, they have to make these completely ridiculous mental gymnast videos where they only focus on the part of the data that agrees with them, and then they hope that you are dumb enough to not take a step backwards and look at the bigger picture. It's a massive grift. Don't fall for it.
Yeah, but you've just labeled the entire left as one big group, which it's not. That's like saying, oh, the New York Times supports fascism. It does at times, yes. That's true. It does at times. But also...
For now, that's all. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, subscribe.
Pretty bad video, to be honest. There was a couple of good points, but actually, no, not really. There was a couple of points that could have been far worse. So now let's take a look at the old second thought video.
This is how I eat healthy on busy work days. For a quick breakfast, I had avocado toast and juice. Then I did a working lunch with my favorite place.
Influence. It's a disease that killed Spaniards in the 20s. Nope, it's something else.
Yeah, a joke.
Google defines influence as a long sentence you
don't joke like that.
already basically know.
Yeah, I get the joke that this organization defines.
But what you might
word.
not know is exactly how much effort some people go through to exert it, or how much money they spend.
I mean, I would argue it's not really fair to say that because like how much effort is like I am a mega billionaire with $50 billion in the bank and I spent 10 million on this. Okay, that is not much effort at all.
And telling
the
you
amount of money is relative.
about these two things is really all this video is about. Because we all know the wealthy in this country have a lot of influence over our politics and our culture, and also everything left after that. So it's not like a video about that would be exposing some...
Yeah, so the point is there that, second thought is now saying, basically saying all what the people have influence, not necessarily saying them right.
Some well-kept secret or anything. But what this video can do is give you an idea of scale. We've all heard the so-and-so spent $10 billion this election stat and thought, that sucks. But hardly anyone has seen diagrams like this, or like this, or like this, about the networks of influence that those election stats don't capture. And that's a shame, because when you...
I mean, as stated already, when you look at the likes of both Republican and Democrat, and most of them go end up at the same point. Joe Biden is a fairly, right centrist fella to have for president. Not the most, definitely, but still.
You go past the big number and get into the details of how influence is actually carried out and where the money goes, there's a lot more to it than most people realize.
Right. Yeah. Indeed. Yeah. Okay.
This right here is a really, really good visual representation of the wealthiest areas of influence, and I made it myself and I got very positive feedback on it. And today, we're going to go over it and fill stuff in using just two families, the Kochs and the Wilkses. We could
examples, so not everyone.
do more, but you'll see why just two is more than enough in a sec. All we're going to do this video is list their different methods of influence, how much they're spending, and its effects. And that's it. Because honestly, I don't need to do anything else to make my point. The facts speak for themselves.
You do.
Once I speak to them. Let's start with the Wilkses.
There's a whole thing preaching to the choir, but anyway.
Part of the video overlaps a bit with what my buddy Ugani did a few months ago, so if you want a more detailed look, go check out his video right here. Anyway, the Wilkses
Nothing's coming up.
are two brothers with...
The YouTubers don't do that anymore, just please. It's like back in the day when people would have end screens and then end screens would disappear because of whatever technical glitch, and then it's like, look, you can click on this video here. It's like, yes, I know the video is on screen in the video, but I can't actually click, because the end screen is gone. So
some very far-right politics who made their billions in the fracking industry. So far so good. These guys could have been happy just casually destroying the place I live, Earth, and you probably would have never heard their name. But they cleverly realized they could use that money from fracking to destroy the other place I live, my brain. Because if you've never heard of the Wilkses before now, you've certainly heard of the online media industries that they fund, PragerU and the Daily Wire. In 2013, the Wilkses dumped over $6.5 million into PragerU, and in 2015, they funded the creation of the Daily Wire with $4.7 million in seed money. Let me tell you right now, nobody making socialist content has ever gotten that kind of seed money to do something similar.
Depends on how much money they have themselves, isn't it?
But we'll get back to that later.
What matters right now is what PragerU and the Daily Wire do with all that money. If, like me, you haven't checked in a while,
Get ready. They push the LGBT grooming narrative and call for increased state violence against those in the queer community. They've said the gay community was, quote, a hell of a lot better off when they were oppressed by the heterosexual monogamists than when they're allied with trans activists, repeating the myth.
Right, definitely makes sense, you know, definitely not a complete pile of bullshit.
That the biggest threat to queer people is other queer people, not far-right pundits literally calling for them to be imprisoned and executed. They claim the 2020 election was fraudulent. No surprises there. They have segments talking about how they wish oh so badly that they could say the N-word, and that shopping at Target makes you, quote, gay and a pervert. That one's new. And they're all for
Yeah, it's...
book bans and book burnings because the Bible supposedly says that's okay. That climate change is
the Bible also says you shouldn't take oaths, so...
a hoax, or the science just isn't in yet, so don't do anything. Wonder if the fracking billionaires like that one. And they've recently also casually dropped that they believe women are, quote, disproportionately wrecking the West.
That's...
And I'm gonna stop here because,
certainly.
one, all these examples are from just 1 month, May 2023 or thereabouts, and two, you get the idea.
There are a lot of ads in this video.
These online media outlets funded and owned by the Wilkses are broadcasting some of the most untrue, hateful, and oftentimes outright fascist rhetoric. And I'm using that word correctly, you can fight me in the comments. And they're doing so to audiences that are not just massive, but can actually rise.
Oh, sorry, that's sort of my point, though, is that there's lots of ads in this video. It's a socialist video, and yet it makes money off of selling products. You know, it's like, seems a little bit, you know, like bullshit. You know, it's like, we're socialists. You should have the things you should have, but also buy this product so you'll have less money at the end of the day. Oh, okay, that seems a bit weird, doesn't it? Maybe I shouldn't give you money. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't just buy this product randomly just because, you know, an ad was pushed in my face. Just a thought.
Rival more established media. You've seen the obscene subscriber counts of channels like PragerU and Ben Shapiro,
okay.
but that's only giving you a small idea of these institutions' reach.
Okay. I will say something here. I would question how botted these channels are. Because as somebody who has studied bots, they are very easy and remarkably cheap to get. YouTube, to be clear, I have never paid for bots on my channel or any other channels that I regularly post or anything like that. I want to be very clear on that. But, you know, the point is, I've never done that. But if you wanted to, you could make, and when I say cheap, I don't mean like cheap, I mean like it would be cheap for somebody with a couple of million hanging around, you know. But the point is, yeah, it would be fairly easy for someone to bot these channels, and also just in general, you having a devoted audience does tend to cause that audience to, you know, multi-subscribe. They subscribe to multiple channels. So yeah, it's not really a reliable thing. I've made a video in the past called "The Subscriber Count is a Lie." It is. It just isn't really a great thing. You know, I have at time recording around 30 subscribers. They could all be one person, very easily. They could easily be one person.
On Facebook, for example, the Daily Wire often finds a larger audience than the New York Times, the Washington Post, NBC News, and
I mean, that's Facebook, like.
CNN combined, according to this NPR article from 2021. Not only do these online media have a huge role in shaping the national dialogue by nurturing and then feeding moral panics up to larger institutions like Fox, who will then encourage far-right vigilantes into acts of stochastic terrorism, these online personalities' influence helps them shape actual real-life laws. Recently, for example, the Daily Wire's Matt Walsh was a big part of the reason that Bill HB1 passed in Florida, a bill banning gender-affirming healthcare for those under 18.
I mean, to be fair, it's fucking Florida. You know, Florida is like worldly. It's known worldly as a piece of shit. So just, you know, to be fair, you know, it's not. It's a mockery. It's like America is already a mockery. In like pretty much, America is like an abusive person who's like a pervert. You know, like you know, you're not laughing at them because they're also extremely violent and will murder millions of people just at fly of a hand. But you know, you're also going, but also, you know, still, yeah, kind of stupid people. So Florida is definitely an example of, it is the mockery even within America, of America. Like, everyone just goes, yeah, Florida is, you know.
So, you know, money well spent for the Wilkses. But not just by the Wilkses. Although the Kochs aren't direct investors in either PragerU or the Daily Wire based on what we could find online, one of the Koch's nonprofits, Americans for Prosperity, and don't worry, we'll get back to them later, have campaigned on behalf of Ron DeSantis, and he gave over $100,000 to the Daily Wire last year. But that's obviously not all. Prominent Daily Wire figures like Ben Shapiro have received
that would be,
speaking fees from the Koch-funded Young Americans
I feel like that's probably just like they'll shift away from Trump to him.
Foundation and also Koch-funded Turning Point USA. You can already kind of see the network of mutual support appearing here, but we're not done yet. What about more traditional media, like the press? Well, these conservative infinite money glitches are there too. For example, Charles Koch has funded Tucker Carlson's media company, The Daily Caller. You might not have heard about The Caller before, but in 2017, it got $980,000 from a combination of funds
That was what I was referring to.
from the creatively named Charles Koch Institute and the Charles Koch Foundation. And before you get worried, let me reassure you. They do the exact same thing as the Daily Wire and PragerU, just mostly in article format. Their tabloid-style articles are always some variant of, the barbarians are at the border. It's time to freak out. Queer people are groomers. Trump did nothing wrong. And given that last headline, it probably won't surprise you to find out that on top of the nearly $1 million from Charles Koch, $150,000 of the Daily Caller's funding came from the Trump campaign. And together, those two investments made up over 97% of the Daily Caller's revenue that year. In other words, Carlson's paper simply wouldn't exist without the Kochs and Trump money. And it's pretty obvious what kinds of messages that money is buying and spreading.
Yeah.
But even though Carlson is a celebrity, the Daily Caller really isn't. Even with $1 million in a single year, it's a relatively fringe media media outlet catering to an audience already convinced of some pretty extreme far-right politics. You probably hadn't heard of it before this video, but what you definitely have heard
Yeah, I mean, I had heard of it, but not like that
of
much.
is the Atlantic, and the Cokes are there too.
Is HelloFresh worth
Fuck
the
off.
price?
Sorry.
Absolutely. I just love the idea of having my meal.
You know, don't you just love when you have your meals planned for you? Like a prison? Fucking Christ. Don't buy HelloFresh. They treat their, their employees terribly and, just, oh God. Anyway.
Or are themselves heads of Coke-funded organizations like FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. And what kinds of articles do these Coke-affiliated journalists write in The Atlantic? As you might expect, given everything else in this video, they talk about how free speech is under threat and can't say anything. Well, getting paid quite a bit to say exactly that in a major magazine.
Yeah.
And because this really is quite a tight-knit group, in the process of writing these articles, they happen to stumble into defending guys like Jordan Peterson, a guy who really can't say anything because of the darn woke mob.
Up to yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
He seems to be doing okay now.
Like with a lot of other conservative ventures in the free speech circles, this strategy funnels a mainstream audience, in this case that of a pretty legitimate magazine, to a climate change denier and well-known transphobe also getting his own cut of the Coke fund by painting him as a victim. Truly, no one could have seen this coming. And I chose to talk about The Atlantic here because it bridges the gap to the whole Daily Wire crowd quite nicely.
I mean, yeah.
But The Atlantic is far from the only press outlet the Cokes are putting money into. There are plenty of outlets and organizations getting the attention of the billionaire brothers. Another big one on the list, for example, is Time Inc., which the Cokes put
I believe Time Inc. There's also something involving Time Inc. where they are involved in foreign media as well. I'm not sure if it's the brothers themselves who are involved in that, but they own the company owns a bunch of outlets abroad as well. So if you're someone like me who's not American, well, don't worry, you're also affected by this sort of thing as well.
$650 million into the purchase of in 2017. To give you an idea, Time Inc. used to own magazines like Time, of course, but also Fortune, People, Sports Illustrated, Essence, and the list keeps on going.
Yeah.
Just to kind of recap, because I've been going pretty quickly here, right now, looking at only two families and in only two sectors of influence, online video and traditional media, we already have so much to go off of. A ton of money and huge audiences to match. The Cokes and the Wilkses have, thus far in the video, already spent hundreds of millions to either completely command or have a pretty direct impact on the editorial line of massive media organizations reaching millions
Even a minor share, if you're just a biggest shareholder, you have a certain amount of pull.
of people in the US. These organizations then use their funds to spread homophobic, transphobic, and climate skeptic rhetoric, or will serve as a bridge to other figures receiving conservative funding like Jordan.
The immediate response to this was no, but I get that their idea is well some outlets aren't homophobic, like okay, but what about the actually like, economically, stuff like that that's a bit different, anyway, yeah, so.
Peterson, who will make these statements more aggressively than better respected press can afford to.
Yes.
And by now, you might be wondering how this all happens. I've been using the Cokes or the Wilkses as short.
I mean, I will say, while obviously, it isn't as easy. The same sort of scenario is kind of set up with the second thought, like somebody comes across a left winger who says that you should watch, somebody comes across somebody who's, fairly left wing who says you should watch Hassan. Then Hassan says you should go ahead and you should watch Second Thought, and then Second Thought goes ahead and says you should watch Hakeem, and then suddenly you're arguing that. All sorts of things that are going on. By the way, for those of you who don't like Hakeem, apparently he's deleted a bunch of the videos. So some of the videos are gone in the past. So either that's a cleanup operation to clean up their image, because the whole thing of getting removed from Nebula, or else it's an honest to goodness move for the future. So who knows? There could be a move for the future. Do people change? They certainly do. Anyway, I'm just saying that the argument could be made that there's a certain feeling around this from this perspective of that's in place, and I just want to make that clear point because that's important, to make.
Shorthand, but it's probably pretty obvious that they're not out there doing all these deals themselves. So what's going on? This last column is kind of a grab bag. Throughout this video, you've heard me bring up a number of different organizations: Americans for Prosperity, the Reason Foundation, the Charles Koch Foundation and Institute, FIRE, and so on. All of these organizations' funding can be traced back to a couple sources. Another set of organizations with names like Stand Together, Donors Trust, TC4 Trust, or Americans for Prosperity. These are all pretty much interchangeable organizations that are most visibly funded by the Kochs, but usually also get donations from hundreds of other wealthy conservatives and so-called free market advocates. Take Stand Together as a quick example. It's one of these centers from which a lot of the influence money flows down to the smaller orgs that have come up throughout the last 15 minutes. On their website, Stand Together describes themselves as a, quote, philanthropic community, but that's a little vague. On their tax documents, they're a little more explicit. Stand Together's mission, in their own words, is to, quote, advance its members' common business interest by advancing the principles of free markets and a free society.
Yeah, those things don't really go well. Anyway.
You get the idea. Philanthropy, business owners making more money. Potato, potato. And this goes for most of these organizations.
Open secrets again?
Which are almost all nonprofits that, quote, do virtually nothing but pass grants through to other politically active 501c4 organizations. So what else do they do when they move these funds around if it's not to either of the other two media categories? Well, for starters, they'll fund AstroTurf groups like Speech First, a student group, quote, defending free speech on college campuses that happens to get
What the fuck, man, seriously.
funding and professional leadership money up the chain from Donors Trust. Or, still on college campuses, Koch-led funds will be directed at academic departments. To take just one example, because there are a lot of these, Koch-funded organizations will finance research centers like the Mercatus.
So this is why they brought up, this is why you remember brought up the the whole university stuff.
Center at George Mason University, giving their organization's oversight over faculty hiring decisions and even some student admissions, according to this article in the New York.
That's part of the problem, which is sociology and politics is often, students themselves are already somewhat left wing, and that's just something there. So, but there is the whole thing of economics, and keep in mind that's mostly the people you're going for. It's economics professors and business professors,
Times.
Those are the people you want to ensure you get the right people in charge, not really studying politics, because at that point you're just going to get a poor education,
This video without acknowledging the dozens of think tanks propped up in all 50 states, which got combined $83 million from Koch-funded orgs and their allies in 2011. Important names include the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, and the Manhattan Institute. You'll remember the Heritage Foundation from every piece of climate change denial research ever, the Cato Institute for also denying climate change, and the Manhattan Institute for being the place where the critical race theory moral panic began. But the story doesn't end there. These think tanks, alongside a number of the other organizations in what has been called the Coctopus, are deeply involved in yet another type of influence, lobbying, which they do at every level of the American government. Through the Americans for Prosperity group in particular, the Kochs and their fossil fuel allies have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on attack ads against Democratic candidates, most visibly against Obama in 2012.
See, this is bad because, that's,
They have also poured a lot of money into the campaign funds of conservatives.
Oh, yeah, I remember what's the anti-Obama ads. My God, some of them are fucking insane.
Far right of the Republican Party, after failing to successfully prop up the Tea Party in order to push Republicans closer to the extreme. You might say they succeeded. And there is so much more. From the Montpelier Society to the NRA to countless hundreds of other student groups, politicians, media organizations, nonprofits, there is truly no limit to how much time you can spend hopping from one organization to another, just following the rabbit hole of funding diagrams down to groups in your state, in your city, where you went to college. I can't do this justice. I mean, I've given you the diagrams, I've given you examples, I've given you lists to try to fill this all out, but there's just so much more that I couldn't fit into this video.
Yeah. I mean, you do come out with a video every 2 weeks or so,
Anti-Muslim, anti-LGBT groups just remembered. There. Between 2014 and 2018, Donors Trust and Donors Capital Fund gave, quote, $13 million to organizations that profess anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, or anti-LGBTQ sentiments, including more than $2.7 million to nonprofits considered hate groups by SPLC.
Yeah.
You're just going to have to trust me that what I've talked about represents maybe, and this is admittedly just a guess, 5% of what these two families are out there doing. And this is what I want to end the video on. There are a lot of people, and a lot of them billionaires, contributing to the various organizations I've mentioned who also have organizations of their own, who have companies that advertise in hundreds of media outlets, who have charitable donations going to university econ departments, and who have nonprofit astroturf groups staging protests near you. It's simply impossible for me or for anyone to catalog it, and even more difficult for the anti-capitalist left to match this kind of influence. This is only something that billionaires can do.
The thing is, though, and this is the key point, as I made the point, though, I didn't actually make the point very well. The likes of Second Thought, there is this sort of thing that goes to far right, sort of mixed with communism sort of style system, which is very odd, which can occur. And this has occurred on the likes of YouTube. But of course, the thing is, they don't have the scale. The scale is the key thing.
The billionaires tend to like being billionaires. So yes, I know that Democrats have their own megadonors and their own NGOs and astroturf groups, but the left doesn't. Not with this kind of scale. There aren't billionaires.
It is good that Second Thought made this point because the Democrats are funded by the way, majority of them by the same people. For all the talk of funding Republicans, most people who fund Republicans also fund Democrats, mostly because it's a terrible idea to only fund one political group when there only are two. Because it's like Democrats go, oh, you didn't give us any money. We're going to punish you for that, We're going to punish you for that. Warner Brothers, they gave us money. Disney, you didn't. So Disney, we're going to do a little bit of investigation into your tax, and we're going to charge you for all that. We're not going to charge the other guys though, because they gave us money. That's what's going to happen if you're a billionaire and you give money one side, and if it is, a business side thing and all these things. Which is, if you do too much, yeah, these political parties, if they win, are going to go, yeah, no, we're going to pick favorites. This is why most of them do fund both parties.
To fund a network this powerful that would advocate for their abolition. And as a fun exercise to close out the video, let me give you an idea of what it would take to try and match what the right has without being a capitalist billionaire. What you're going to want to do is take your salary and set it all aside. Don't spend any money whatsoever. Do that for 10 years. Now find a way to multiply that by 100. Either wait 90 more years or maybe invest in stocks or something. I don't know. Multiply it by 100 somehow. If my math is right, you should now have roughly $56 million set aside. That's good. That's great. I'm really proud of you. You're 0.1% of the way there.
The ideas of the ruling class are in every epoch of the ruling ideas. Karl Marx.
One of the things right-wing media does really well is establishing life or death stakes. It's us versus the mainstream media, us versus the groomers, the migrants, the far-left communist Democrats, whatever the hot-button issue of the week is. Let me show you what I mean. Here we have 3 examples of right-wing coverage of the same story.
Brown news is awful. So anyway, goodbye. Not awful. I just didn't really. I tried it out. Didn't really work for me. But anyway, point is, yeah, that's a little video there. I think there was on watching that there was a few points that were relevant. I can see where your man got the ideas from. But of course there is a key thing. The key points to take away from that video, the second video, which is Democrats are not the left. Also when Second Thought is bringing up socially left-wing things, that's more of a showing for people who are there rather than saying if they weren't doing this it would be fine. No, that's not the only issue. They're also capitalist focused. So anyway, that's the video. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.